Hello, it's Mark here from Yokel Bear Reads. A very quick post today. I'm going to whip through these books quickly because I'm kind of in the middle of moving at the moment. Most of my stuff is in storage because there's a delay between like my old place and the new flat that I'm moving into. So I've had to put the majority of my books in storage, which has freaked me out a little bit. I like having my books around me. But I thought I'd do a quick September to be read, TBR. But I'm probably going to whip through them fairly quickly because I've got to go out and do some more stuff about the move. But there you go. So, as usual, my month will include some Agatha Christie. And what I'm going to go into this time is these are 12 short stories, including Witness for the Prosecution. This is the BBC TV series tie-in book. And there's a lot of stories in here I've not read before. I've read a lot of the main Agatha Christie's, and I've read Witness for the Prosecution before. But what I'm really interested in is the other stories, the other short stories that I've not read before, including one called The Red Signal, which I'm very much looking forward to. So yeah, there's always normally a ghost story or some Agatha Christie in my TBR, and this is this month's Christie. The other thing that I will be reading, and I've already kind of made some headway with it, is this absolutely amazing book by David France called How to Survive a Plague, the story of how activists and scientists tamed AIDS. This is something quite personal to me because, as a gay man living through the 80s and 90s, I witnessed a lot of stuff around the HIV/AIDS epidemic and lost friends, and so reading this has been quite emotional so far. But one thing I will say is that I've probably read about a quarter of it, and it is an absolutely brilliant in its structure. It tells kind of personal stories. It's told through the stories of the people that were involved, either the scientists or the activists. But also as well, the science is really kind of understandable. There isn't anything in here that nobody would understand because it's too scientific. But really what this is about is a story about how a community came together in the face of the most appalling thing happening and actually organised around it and became politically active. And this is an absolutely superb book so far, so yeah, I'm really looking forward to finishing this. Linked in a way because this next author actually died of an AIDS-related condition, which was the filmmaker Derek Jarman. Vintage have put out the final volume of his diaries, and for those that don't know, Derek Jarman was a filmmaker in the 1980s and early 1990s who produced some very, I guess you'd kind of say, art house experimental films, but all of them are absolutely brilliant. I'm a huge Derek Jarman fan. And this is his diaries from the early 1990s right up until his death. And the last kind of entry is two or 3 weeks before he died. Vintage have actually produced, they've recently republished his previous set of diaries called under the name Modern Nature, which if you ever get a chance to read it, do so, because it's a real mixture of personal recollections, politics, history, all the things that Derek Jarman recorded in his journals, which are absolutely brilliant. It's moving. Modern Nature is moving. It will make you angry. It will make you cry. So I'm really looking forward to reading this as well. I think I probably will cry during this, but I think there's probably going to be a lot of uplifting stuff in there. The next book is by one of my favourite authors of all time, and when he publishes a novel, it's a real treat. It's a real event for me, and that's Patrick Gale. Take Nothing With You. And I've been a fan of Patrick Gale probably since my teenage years, with his first book, The Aerodynamics of Pork, and I've been reading all of his books ever since. There's one author that is consistent in my life, And while some of his novels haven't quite hit the mark, there's never been one that I haven't enjoyed. This one is the story of Eustace, who at the age of 50 has suddenly realised that he may be dying, but he's also just fallen in love for the third time. And this book is set around him looking back at his childhood and how he discovered about life, sexuality, love, despair. But it's through the kind of story of him taking up the cello and playing the cello and music forming a part of his life. And the way that Patrick Gale writes, and I've actually read the first chapter of this, and I can honestly say it's probably one of the most perfect first chapters in terms of the quality of writing, the style of writing. It just dances off the page and makes you want to read more. So this is going to be a big read for me in September. If previous Patrick Gale novels are anything to go by, I'd imagine I'll read it, put it down, pick it straight back up and read it for a second time straight away, because that's how it goes with me and Patrick. The penultimate thing that I'm going to try and get through this month, though it is quite big, so I don't know, with all the moving I might not have much time, is Giles Kristian's Lancelot. As it says on the front, warrior, friend, lover, legend. Hey, that could be me. Hey, I don't really read much historical stuff. I've been reading the James Wilde Pendragon series, or the book that's out. But I picked this up, one, because it was a fiver in Tesco's. But the other reason is because I've always had a real kind of love of the Arthurian legends. And there's a lot of stuff out there at the moment that kind of is revisiting that, especially with James Wilde's Pendragon and now this. So I'm kind of intrigued to find out how he's going to approach this particular part of the Arthurian legend. I think they don't really need to say anything much about the story. People know that Lancelot was like kind of one of the greatest knights in King Arthur's court. But he had a bit of a thing about Guinevere, the king's wife. They had a bit of an affair and it all ended a bit, tricky. So I'm quite interested to see how this turns out. And also, I think it would just be a good bit of escapism. I've never read anything by Giles Kristian before, but I've heard good things about him. And the final book that I'm thinking about reading this month, if I get round to it, is Paul Flynn's Good As You, From Prejudice to Pride, 30 Years of Gay Britain. Now, I love a bit of history. I love a bit of LGBTQI history. And this one interests me because a lot of the stuff goes back to the 1950s, the 1940s, or Victorian times, or before that, or you had Peter Ackroyd's Queer City, which was a history of London through LGBT eyes from the Romans onward. But Paul Flynn is really looking at two things here. One, in the time scale, which is the last 30 years, which means this is my lived experience. In here, this is about the time that I've lived through, and I'm interested to see his take on it. But also as well, it's told through the medium of culture. And I think, there's this stuff in here about, what Kylie Minogue means to the LGBT community in the UK, and this stuff here about sport, and this stuff here about the media. But I'm just really interested to read a history about recent history, because I think that sometimes we don't think of it as history. If it's in our lifetime, you think it's just part of your life. But actually, as a gay man in the UK, I've lived through some quite historic changes. From being essentially, when I was under 21 because of the age of consent, any relationship that I was in being essentially illegal and I could potentially go to prison, to right up to today where I can get married. And all those kind of things that have come about in this last 30 years. So I think it's a fascinating piece of history. I think it's going to be quite personal to me. So I'm quite looking forward to reading this. So that's it. That's what I'm going to attempt to get through this month. Whether I will, because of all the moving, I don't know. But I'm sure there'll be times when I really, really want to just forget about unpacking boxes just lay down on the sofa and read some books. So hopefully these ones will be it. So that's it. That's my September to be read. And once I've moved into my new house, I will be posting more. All right then. See you then. Bye.